In May, the New Yorker magazine published a rip-roaring spy novel of a profile of a New York prosecutor named Zainab Ahmed. She's an assistant U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of New York, and she specializes in prosecutions of terrorist suspects. According to the New Yorker, Ahmed has logged more hours talking to legitimate al-Qaeda members, hardened terrorist killers, than any other prosecutor in America. She has prosecuted 13 people for terrorism since 2009. She has never lost a case. That profile came out in May. By July, she'd been recruited by Robert Mueller, where she was working alongside another spy movie-ready character who's named Brendan Van Grack. And he is to espionage what she is to terrorism, a veteran espionage prosecutor with the Justice Department. And it had been interesting enough when we learned that he'd been leading the grand jury inquiry in the Eastern District of Virginia into Michael Flynn. When Mueller took over all matters involving Flynn in May, Brendan Van Grack was the only prosecutor from that investigation whom Mueller kept on. He dismissed everybody else, kept the spy guy. So you've got famed terrorism prosecutor, famed espionage prosecutor, working with Mueller for months now. We haven't known where or when they would turn up. Looky-loo. The statement of offense against Mike Flynn, signed Brendan L. Van Grack and Zainab Ahmed. You want to read some tea leaves? One good place to start might be those two names and their respective prosecutor superpowers. Stick a pin in what seems like it may be a prescient pearl of wisdom from that New Yorker profile of Zainab Ahmed. When it comes to winning cases, quote, cooperators are the unsung heroes. They always know more than they think they know. Tell me more. That does it for us tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow. Now it's time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Good evening, Rachel. And so here we are once again at the what did the president know and when did he know it moment. There's that scene at Mar-a-Lago that's in this information of Michael Flynn getting the word from apparently Jared Kushner at Mar-a-Lago to go ahead and as a private citizen, negotiate on behalf of the United States with foreign countries. And where was President-elect Donald Trump when that conversation was going on? Did he hear Jared Kushner say that? Did he tell Jared Kushner to say that?
Well, we've got these two different points that are raised in the statement of the offense and in the plea deal. We've got that discussion that you're talking about there, which is reportedly Jared Kushner advising Flynn to have those conversations about that UN resolution. Then we've also got Flynn talking to Mar-a-Lago, talking to somebody from the presidential transition team about his conversations with the Russian ambassador over sanctions. And NBC News is reporting the person he was talking to on that matter was K.T. McFarland. And the reason that ends up, I think, being really important is because while it is conceivable that Mike Flynn might have thought he had to answer to Jared Kushner on the UN resolution thing, there is no chance on earth that he ever thought he had to answer to Fox News personality K.T. McFarland, who was hired to be his deputy. So when he was speaking to K.T. McFarland, it wasn't to get instruction from her. She was obviously conveying word to Flynn from somebody else. And the person who NBC News reports that she was staffing at Mar-a-Lago when those conversations were happening was the president himself. So Flynn has a lot to say, and I have a feeling the prosecutors know almost all of it already.
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't have gone through with their deal today if they didn't have it all. They first of all get a very clear outline of it in the proffer from his lawyers, as we know. And then before they get to this stage today, they have to sit with him. They have to get it all down. And Michael Flynn risks committing another crime if he lies to them when he's telling them what he's willing to testify to. And so this is the scariest night yet in that White House.
Well, yeah, and you know, the agreement, we had Paul Fishman here, was the U.S. attorney from New Jersey, from the Bridgegate case, right? Talking to him about that negotiation. He said what really stood out for him in the court filings today was how there was basically no room to breathe for Mike Flynn in these filings. What he's agreed to cooperate for and about is limitless. And the only thing that he's given a break on in terms of knowing what his fate is on a very tiny slice of what they might conceivably charge him for. And so he's got to cooperate with them on everything, up to like taking a polygraph if they want him to, engaging in covert operations on behalf of the prosecutors if they want him to. He has to do everything, cooperate with them on everything, and the only thing they're promising him a break on is lying to the FBI. They haven't charged him with anything else, which means that they can dump all of that on him, anything they've got, without restriction, depending on whether or not he gives them what they want.
And not just him, his son. His son is sitting there liable for possible criminal charges if Michael Flynn doesn't deliver exactly what he's promised to deliver.
Yeah, I mean, this is a remarkable human drama for all the people involved here. I think as a country, it's important right now to watch for how the president weighs his pardon power and whether or not he does try to individually try to not just pressure other people, but individually, personally, try to end this thing by going after Mueller. And if he does either of those things, this becomes a very different situation for the country.
Well, it's a little too late. You've got someone who's already charged with that crime, and that case is already filed. I think the president's learning tonight, if he hadn't learned already, just how limited those powers are when it applies to this case and the stage that it's at now. Rachel, thank you very much. Thanks for sticking with us a few more extra minutes tonight. Really appreciate it. Well, we do have a lot to cover tonight. David Frum will join us, former federal prosecutor Barbara McQuaid, Betsy Woodruff, Jonathan Capehart, Max Boot, and NBC's Ken Delanian will also join us, all on the Flynn guilty plea and the Mueller investigation and the turn it has taken today. And also Norm Ornstein will join us later to discuss exactly what's happening with the Republican tax cut bill on the Senate floor tonight. And if it passes the Senate tonight, what will have to happen to pass it again through the House and the Senate in identical form, because right now those two bills are very different, but that's what it's going to take. At least one more big round for it to get to the president's desk for him to sign it. But first, it is too late. Sometime today, an enraged and very likely panicked president of the United States no doubt had to be told that it is too late to use his ultimate power, the only seemingly absolute power granted to the President of the United States in the Constitution, the power to pardon. In practical terms, the presidential power to pardon is not the superpower that it might appear to be. A close reading of the Constitution shows that there is an exception to the pardon power written right into the Constitution. He shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. And so, no, the president cannot pardon himself to avoid impeachment. The president cannot pardon the vice president to avoid impeachment of the vice president. If, for example, Michael Flynn were to offer testimony to Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller, now that he's cooperating with the Special Prosecutor, that would implicate Donald Trump or Mike Pence in crimes. But today, President Trump, no doubt, had to be schooled in the utter uselessness of his power to pardon Michael Flynn. Before Michael Flynn was allowed to plead guilty to the felony of lying to the FBI today in exchange for either a light sentence or possibly no sentence at all, Michael Flynn had to tell Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller everything that Michael Flynn knows. That began with Michael Flynn's lawyers making what they call a proffer. That's the legal term for what they tell the Special Prosecutor about what Michael Flynn, their client, could tell them if the Special Prosecutor offers Michael Flynn an acceptable plea deal. So before Robert Mueller and his team heard a word out of the mouth of Michael Flynn, they had already heard from Michael Flynn's lawyers, at a minimum, a very convincing outline of what Michael Flynn had to say, something very helpful to the prosecutors. And then when they questioned Michael Flynn knew that lying to them during that questioning would just be another crime that he could be charged with. And so Robert Mueller took in everything Michael Flynn had to say about Donald Trump Jr., about Jared Kushner, about Jared Kushner's wife, Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter, about Attorney General Jeff Sessions, about Paul Manafort, and everyone else working in the Trump White House, the Trump transition, or the Trump campaign, who is of interest to the Special Prosecutor. And only after Michael Flynn answered every one of those questions honestly to the satisfaction of those prosecutors was Michael Flynn offered a deal, the deal that was announced today in federal court, where Michael Flynn showed up to plead guilty after walking through a gauntlet of spectators on the sidewalk, shouting, "Lock him up," in echo of Michael Flynn having said this about Hillary Clinton at the Republican convention last year.
Lock her up, lock her up. You guys are good. Damn right. You're exactly right. There's nothing wrong with that. And you know why? And you know why? You know why we're saying that? We're saying that because if I, a guy who knows this business, if I did a tenth of what she did, I would be in jail today.
A guy who knows this business. It is too late to pardon Michael Flynn because he has already told the special prosecutor everything he knows. And for President Trump, the whole point of pardoning Michael Flynn would be to save him from having to tell the special prosecutor everything he knows. But even that would not have worked. The FBI has known pretty much all year that Michael Flynn committed the crimes that he admitted to today. If Donald Trump had pardoned Michael Flynn on the day that he fired him in February, that would have done Donald Trump absolutely no good. That simply would have meant Michael Flynn would have been forced to tell his story to the special prosecutor even sooner. If the president pardoned Michael Flynn on the day he fired him, he would have saved Michael Flynn from being indicted and pleading guilty today, but a pardon cannot save you from having to testify under oath after being subpoenaed to Robert Mueller's grand jury. And so if Michael Flynn had been pardoned when he was, and then sworn in as a witness for Robert Mueller's grand jury, he would have no Fifth Amendment rights, because then Michael Flynn would not be able to incriminate himself with his own testimony because he had already been pardoned. And so the practical problem with issuing a pardon to Michael Flynn earlier in the year was that that simply would have freed Michael Flynn up to immediately become an under oath witness for the special prosecutor, knowing that the special prosecutor could still indict Michael Flynn for any perjury he might commit while testifying to the grand jury. And so today was probably the day when Donald Trump was finally told by his lawyers that he cannot pardon his way out of this investigation. And it seems very clear that the Trump lawyers do not try to give Donald Trump any of the bad news before they absolutely have to. It even seems that Donald Trump's lawyers try to communicate with him, and only with him, in the press releases that they issue about this investigation, because only Donald Trump could believe a word of those press releases. Here's what the White House lawyer Ty Cobb said today. Today, Michael Flynn, a former national security advisor at the White House for 25 days during the Trump administration and a former Obama administration official, entered a guilty plea to a single count of making a false statement to the FBI. The false statements involved mirror the false statements to White House officials, which resulted in his resignation in February of this year. Nothing about the guilty plea or the charge implicates anyone other than Mr. Flynn. The conclusion of this phase of the special counsel's work demonstrates again that the special counsel is moving with all deliberate speed and clears the way for a prompt and reasonable conclusion. And so that is clearly what Ty Cobb is trying to say to the president today in the Oval Office. Ty Cobb's just showing us his notes of what he tried to tell the president to calm him down today. Only Donald Trump, and maybe Donald Trump Jr., and oh, sure, Eric Trump, and other people who have spent too much time in the bubble of Trump Tower could believe anything in Ty Cobb's statement today. And you know that referring to Michael Flynn as a former Obama official was President Trump's idea. That was his personal input into that statement. Michael Flynn is the linchpin in a case of obstruction of justice against Donald Trump. Michael Flynn may have already told the special prosecutor that Donald Trump knew that Michael Flynn was illegally negotiating on behalf of the United States with foreign countries while still a private citizen working on the Trump transition team. Michael Flynn may have told the special prosecutor already that Donald Trump ordered him to do that, directly or indirectly. We do know that the acting Attorney General, Sally Yates, made emergency trips to the White House on January 26th and 27th to tell White House counsel Don McGahn that Michael Flynn was in big trouble with the FBI. She discussed the possibility of Michael Flynn being prosecuted for what she was reporting to the White House. She was in the White House discussing the possibility of Michael Flynn being prosecuted for what he'd already done. And Donald Trump chose to do absolutely nothing about that, nothing at all. And then the Washington Post, days later, revealed that Michael Flynn and the White House had been publicly lying by insisting that Michael Flynn had no contacts with foreign governments other than to exchange pleasantries. And only after the Washington Post exposed that, only then did President Trump fire Michael Flynn, allowed Michael Flynn to call it a resignation, 18 days after the White House was told by Sally Yates that Michael Flynn had been caught up in an FBI criminal investigation. 18 days. What were they going to do? What was President Trump going to do if the Washington Post did not report that? The day after President Trump fired Michael Flynn, knowing Michael Flynn was under FBI investigation, Donald Trump asked the director of the FBI, James Comey, to let the investigation go.
This is the president speaking. I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go. Now, those are his exact words. Is that correct?
Correct. And the reason I keep saying his words is I took it as a direction.
Right.
I mean, this is the President of the United States with me alone saying, I hope this. I took it as this is what he wants me to do. Now, I didn't obey that, but that's the way I took it.
That is the clear outline of the obstruction of justice case against Donald Trump. And now there's one more fact that we know about Michael Flynn, that when Donald Trump was intervening on his behalf with the director of the FBI, Michael Flynn was guilty of committing federal crimes. He admitted that today. And so Donald Trump, the president of the United States, was trying to stop an FBI investigation, into someone who worked for him, someone who was guilty. And when that FBI investigation did not stop, the president then fired the director of the FBI. And when he talked about his reasons for firing the director of the FBI, he said this.
What I did is I was going to fire Comey. My decision. It was not.
You had made the decision before they came in.
I was going to fire Comey. There's no good time to do it, by the way.
Because in your letter you said I accepted their recommendation.
Yeah, well,
so you had already made the decision.
I was going to fire regardless of recommendation.
So there was
he made a recommendation. He's highly respected, very good guy, very smart guy. The Democrats like him. The Republicans like him. He made a recommendation. But regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey.
And the president said in that interview that he was thinking about the Russia investigation when he fired James Comey. The special prosecutor's investigation has now landed just one person away from Donald Trump. Michael Flynn is that person, one person away from Donald Trump. Donald Trump has to be more worried tonight about the Mueller investigation than anything he has ever worried about in his entire life. Because Donald Trump doesn't understand the law himself. He may be wondering tonight if he said anything to Michael Flynn that constitutes a crime. Donald Trump might be wondering tonight if he ordered Michael Flynn to do anything that is a crime. And Donald Trump is definitely wondering tonight exactly what Michael Flynn has already told Robert Mueller. Jeff Sessions is wondering tonight what Michael Flynn has already told Robert Mueller about Jeff Sessions. Donald Trump Jr. has the same worry. Jared Kushner has already been exposed today as the person who might have the most to worry about in Michael Flynn's testimony, because NBC News has confirmed that the unnamed senior transition official who was referred to in documents filed in federal court today is Jared Kushner. It was Jared Kushner who told Michael Flynn to break the law and negotiate on behalf of the United States with foreign countries, while Michael Flynn and Jared Kushner were both private citizens working on the Trump transition. So it is already publicly clear that Michael Flynn has given up Jared Kushner in his plea deal with the special prosecutor. And so tonight, Jared Kushner and his lawyers should be wondering, what does Jared have to give up to the special prosecutor to get him out of trouble? If Jared Kushner needs a stay out of jail card, whose name's on that card? Who can Jared Kushner give up to the special prosecutor? We'll be right back.
Around the time that President Trump's former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was leaving a D.C. courthouse after pleading guilty to lying to the FBI, Mitch McConnell was on Capitol Hill triumphantly proclaiming to reporters, "We have the votes." He did not, however, have a bill. Republicans were still jamming last-minute provisions into their massive tax package that primarily benefits corporations and the wealthies, while adding $1 trillion to the national debt at least. And, we should note, delivering a body blow to Obamacare.
There was not one single hearing, not one on the specifics with respect to this legislation. There was not one single hearing on the health changes that the majority seeks to make that put a dagger into the heart of the Affordable Care Act.
Republicans are set to try to complete their mad dash to pass the bill at any moment tonight. We don't know when. After spending today loading it with handwritten handouts to corporations and the wealthy they tried to keep secret. NBC News had to get the text to the nearly 500-page bill from a lobbyist just a short time ago. They're the ones that had it. And this is the reason Republicans gritted their teeth and got behind Donald Trump. They know he may be dangerous. They know he may have colluded with a foreign adversary to disrupt and sabotage an American election, but they also know that he will sign whatever they and their donors want. And apparently, that's enough. We will show you one senator's outraged response tonight, video you must see just after this break. Senate GOP is in such a massive rush to give benefits to corporations and the wealthy, it is literally rewriting the American tax code at this hour by hand.
Hey, happy holidays, everybody. It's the night we're going to be voting on the tax bill. I just got the tax bill 25 minutes ago. This is the tax bill. See how thick it is? That's what it looks like. Oh, no, let's look at the bill. This is what it really looks like. I want you to take a look at this, folks. This is your government at work. Here's the bill as it's written. Here's the modifications that are in it. I can read one word. It's called add this language. Can you tell me what that word is? If you can, you got better eyes than me. This is unbelievable. We're doing massive tax reform on an absolute incredible timeline. This is going to affect everybody in this country. It's going to shift money from middle-class families to the rich. It's amazing. And we've been given this 20 minutes ago, 25 minutes ago. And we're supposed to vote on it in a couple hours.
With me now, 2016 independent presidential candidate Evan McMullin, the former policy director for the House Republican Conference, and Catherine Rampell, opinion columnist of the Washington Post. You worked on the Hill. You worked on the House side of the Hill, crafting legislation. Isn't this exactly what even never Trumpers such as yourself live for as a Republican?
Not exactly. I mean, I would say that what we live for, what we used to live for as Republicans is sure, lowering taxes where we could, fiscal responsibility, ultimately paying down the debt. And what we have now, we are already running in deficits. Our budgets are running in deficits, but we're now adding to that. That's what this bill does. And it represents a tremendous departure from what we used to stand for, fiscal responsibility. Now, I know there are disagreements between the right and the left on whether that's necessary, but I think it's healthy for a party, for one party in Washington to make that argument that there needs to be fiscal responsibility, that we should eliminate our deficits and pay down our debt. Right now, we don't have that. And what you see here is a Republican Party that is changing not only in its tone with Donald Trump and its, I would say, lack of decency among leaders, among the president, with the president for sure, but also the policies are changing, the actual policies.
I think to me, it's both the policy and it's the way they've gone about this, which is every bit as abnormal as Donald Trump's tweets are. The way they are passing major legislation at this hour. I mean, it's true. Legislating is a mess. There's lots of amendments that get stuck in. Sure. There's what they call stocking stuffers. You fill the Christmas tree. There's even handwriting on bills sometimes. The speed, though, with which they are hammering this thing through really is quite unprecedented.
Well, but they have to jam this thing through because the more time that this is exposed to the public, the more the public will hate it. This is the most hated piece of tax legislation ever. It's more unpopular even than tax hikes, than the Clinton tax hikes, than the George H.W. Bush tax hikes.
I want to just reiterate that because there was a great chart showing the polling. This bill right now, which are tax cuts ostensibly, although mostly corporations and wealthy heirs, this bill is less popular as a tax cut bill than tax increases under Clinton and
Right, because it's a huge giveaway to rich people. It's basically not only saying we're not going to give goodies away to the poor and to the middle class, which, for the record, the George Bush tax cuts actually did a better job of. Yes. They did do. It's not only that we're not going to give things away to them, we're going to take from them to cross-subsidize the rich. And beyond that, if you look a little bit further along down the line, Republicans are already making known that they're going to use the deficits that result from this as an excuse to shred the social safety net. Well, so this is very bad for the middle class and the poor.
And not only that, so there's one level at which, I keep saying to people on Twitter and other Republicans, like, just vote on Monday. Just vote on Monday.
They have the votes now.
Just vote on Monday. You can vote on Monday. It's 500 pages. It's the American tax code. There's stuff in there for the beer lobby. There's stuff in there for private equity. Lord knows what's been jammed in for every other K Street interest that managed to shove something at the last second.
If they wait to vote on Monday, the public will know what's in it.
Well, see,
lawmakers will themselves might even learn what's in it and not like it anymore.
Not only that, to me, it also relates to the Flynn news today. This is John Harwood, I thought, had a really good column today. He said barely 10 months after exuberant Republicans took control of the entire federal government, their prevailing mood has now turned to desperation. Right. And you get the sense of, like, the president's former national security advisor got indicted today for committing a crime in the White House.
Right.
You better get your stuff passed now.
That's right. And so this is a do or die moment for the party. They have to get something done. They have to get something that will keep their base with them, especially heading into 2018 and beyond that. And they have to get something done. Now, the challenge here, I think, is still going to come in garnering more support than just their most hardcore base, because this is such an unpopular bill. But they're in a tough spot. And then you look at the Roy Moore race, and if he were to lose, then the Republicans would have an even harder time getting things done. So they're just in a tough spot. They're not going to have Donald Trump to help them in 2018 or beyond. So they've got to have something to show for it. And they see this administration going down the tubes now. This administration is more vulnerable than it's ever been with the news about Flynn today. And this is what they made the grand compromise for.
This is it. This is the.
And so if they don't get it done, then.
Yeah, but even Republicans are not so keen on this bill. Like, if you look at the voting public and you ask people, do you think this bill will lower your taxes? Only a quarter of Republicans think that it'll help them.
Yes, although the donor class is into it. We should say.
Not even all of the donor class, because
some of the donor class.
They're upset about the fact that the state and local tax deduction will be eliminated.
Yes, the people of Greenwich. Some of them in Greenwich are going to take it on the nose.
That's where the donors are based.
Well, but here's to me the larger thing, right? Is that if you are Jeff Flake, to me, is a sort of perfect example, right? Jeff Flake, who wrote his book about how terrible Trump is, he's going to give his speeches. At the end of this whole thing, Jeff Flake is a yes on this bill.
Yeah, but I would say on that, I mean,
it's very disappointing.
Look, I think the way this is moving forward is a disappointment. I think the fact that it's going to add to the debt is a disappointment. I would like to see corporate rates lowered. I would like to see us more competitive. But I think it's irresponsible to do what they're doing now at a time when unemployment is at a record low, the stock market's at a record high. If we can't institute fiscally responsible policies in this context, when Republicans control all of Washington, we're never going to do it.
When you're going to do it is when there's a recession and the austerity hammer is going to be brought down on healthcare spending and things like that. McMillan and Catherine Rampell, thank you both. That is all in for this evening. The Rachel Maddow Show.